What is up, guys? Today we're going to be finishing the exhaust system, at least the portion of it that has to be done before the engine can go back in, and then I might come back with you guys later on in the week and install the new 90-degree AN fitting that I ordered, because I'm still waiting on that to come in. And then we might do a few coolant line things for the turbo and stuff. I have some fittings that I got for the turbo for the coolant, because I will be running coolant lines through here since it has the coolant ports on it. I'm going to run them and use them because it'll be easier on the turbo that way. A couple of other little things that I did to the truck. I went through and removed all of the vacuum lines that were in the engine bay because I'm going to be rerouting all of them anyway. I removed the coolant overflow container because we won't be using that anymore. The radiator has an inlet for like a GM style expansion tank, so I'm going to be running one of them over here. I removed the antenna thing because it was bothering me. I put some silicone sealant on that little AC drain because that is where the water was getting into my floor from for all this time, so I got that taken care of. So I just was kind of working on little stuff while I was letting the garage warm up. Oh, and I plugged the steering rack. Just took the bolts out, cut the ends of the lines and left the lines in them, and then just welded them shut. So that should be all done. The power steering rack is plugged. So yeah, and right now I've got the flange bolted up to the turbo. I'm just going to be running pipe basically from here straight over, and then a 90. I'm going to kind of bring it down and run a 90 so that it kind of sits over here right next to this manifold. These plug wires are probably going to have to be moved a little bit so they don't get melted, but it's going to sit about right next to this manifold here pretty much. I'm going to use this bolt here and this bolt here and run some strapping or some tubing or something over to support the downpipe, so all the weight of the downpipe isn't just hanging on the end of the turbo. And then right here is where it'll stop. I'll have a 2-bolt flange back there, and that's where the second half of the downpipe is going to, run underneath the firewall and exit the back of the truck. So I'm gonna sit you guys up somewhere. We're gonna start welding on this thing and kind of getting some cutting done and getting this downpipe done. Maybe today, if I get bored, we'll stick the engine in. I don't know how long this downpipe is gonna take, but if it doesn't take very long, maybe we'll just go ahead and stick the engine back in the truck as well. So I'm gonna get working on this thing, and we'll see how much I can get done today. Alright, I got the pipes out of the box that I ordered and was just kind of eyeballing stuff, and it's looking like I won't even have to cut very much for this first section here. I've got I don't know, what is this, a 45 here. If I slide this in and I kind of play with the angles a little bit, I can get it to point straight to where I want it to go. I want this to hug as close as I can get it to this manifold here, that way I don't have a bunch of wasted space in the engine bay. That worked out better than I thought. All this pipe is covered in like oil, which is good because it means it didn't rust on the way here, but it's also very gross. That's pretty decent pipe too. It's all mandrel bent. It was like 80 bucks for this whole kit, and I've got 2 U's, 2 90s, 2 of these 45s, and 2 like 3-foot long sections of straight pipe, which is pretty cool. Definitely, if you're looking to make your own exhaust, we'll go order one of these things. Here's one of the U sections there, and here's the straight section there. So 80 bucks, not bad. It's some pretty thick pipe too. This isn't like the super cheap thin stuff that you get at AutoZone or anything like that. I'm gonna get this tacked up here with that 45 and then start cutting that 90 and get everything positioned. I'll get it all tacked up, and then I'm also going to be running the wastegate dump back into the downpipe too. So once I have this front section here fully welded, I'll work on this downpipe dump and the back section of the front half of the downpipe as well. I'm gonna start tacking stuff up, and so far this is looking like this won't take nearly as long as I expected it to, so that's good.
In a terrible mess, I got a new tattoo to back up to me all off of the ground.
We are We're almost there. This front of the Y pipe is fully welded, or the down pipe. I just gotta do this piece here and get a strap on it, and that is it. Alright, just about all of the exhaust piping is done. I just need to fully weld this right here, and then that is it. All of the welding will be completely done. The entire downpipe, actually the entire exhaust system, other than obviously the portion of it that goes out the truck, which will be done when it's in the truck, is finished. This looks really, really good. I can't wait to see this thing sitting in the engine bay. I've got the downpipe recirculating back into the downpipe. This was a pain in the butt because I had to cut this thing and bend it this way and weld a plate over to cover the gap. But I got it done. I've checked it with a light. I haven't been able to find any pinholes anywhere. I've checked everything for pinholes and haven't been able to find any. So hopefully when I get this thing on and it's running, there aren't any little pinhole leaks, because they are going to bother me. If there are any, I would rather them be after the turbo than before, but I just don't want to have any at all. There's not going to be any big ones at least, but I would rather just not have any pinholes whatsoever. Yeah, everything is bolted up. I got the two little support brackets here on this, and of course I already had one up here, so everything is supported really well onto the engine. It's not all just hanging off of these two pipes coming up, but it's not all just hanging off the turbo either. It is all kind of structured and supported very well. The weight of the wastegate is being supported by both of these pipes, which is the other advantage to recirculating. It is it's not going to, you know, put a bunch of stress on this piece of pipe here and crack it over time. Everything's just kind of tied together very nicely, and it looks pretty tidy to me. So all that's left to do is, other than welding that, I'm going to pull the entire system back off, including the Y pipe, clean all the welds up with a grinder, flap disc, and get all the slag and kind of grind a few of the real tall welds down, because I'm still using a flux core welder. They still don't look the prettiest. Clean them all up, and then I'm going to wipe the pipe down, get it all nice and clean, and spray some of this black exhaust paint over all of it, just so that it doesn't rust immediately after, you know, it's been heat cycled once. So that's all that's left to do. The rest of the exhaust is done. I got to weld one spot, take a flap disc and a wire wheel to all this stuff, get it cleaned up and looking a little bit more presentable, and just spray some black paint on it, and that will be it. So I'm gonna go and finish this stuff up, get it all bolted back onto the truck, and then I'll give you guys a look at it when it is all finished. Everything is done piping wise. I also went and buttoned up a couple of other little things in the engine, which I will show you right now. So here it is, all painted and everything bolted up. Everything's fully welded. All of this stuff is put on and isn't going to be coming off unless I have issues. But yeah, everything is finished, and this engine is almost ready to go back into the truck. This just looks incredible. It almost, the black paint, even though it cleans everything up, almost makes it look less, I don't know, it doesn't look quite as cool as it did with all the welds and stuff showing, but it'll definitely look a lot nicer after it gets some miles on it, because all the rust would have looked nasty. I went and ran this one first coolant line for the turbos, just straight down to the inlet into the water pump from here. I got those two elbows on with them some thread sealant in them, and then those little 5/8 barb adapters. I have this one on and tightened down, and it just kind of when the hose is on it, the hose is going to come to this side of the feed line and then run down along the engine and back to the heater core. And I ran it this way because the exhaust is here, so that'll keep it away from the hot side of the turbo. This whole system wasn't that bad to make. The hardest part was this right here. It took a lot of fiddling to get that thing to kind of cooperate with me, but I was able to get it after some messing around with it, and I think it'll definitely be worth it, because this exhaust is going to sound much, much cleaner with the wastegate recirculating back into the downpipe. One thing I just thought of, and I'm kind of upset with myself about, is I didn't weld on the bung for the O2 sensor. The O2 sensor I'll probably put it in like right here where the straight section is at on the elbow here, because it's kind of where it was at before, because it just comes out the truck right here. You can kind of see. Here's the O2 sensor. The only things left to do on this engine before I put it back in is the oil drain, the O2 sensor bung, and I want to play around with the fuel rails. So this truck has a little bit of hesitation when I give it throttle sometimes, and I think it's because these injectors are sitting too high and they're spraying a bunch of fuel onto the walls of the intake manifold. So I'm going to go get new fuel rails from the junkyard that have the regulator up here, because only a couple of years that Dakota's had the regulator here. I'm going to cut them, drop the injectors until this silver part here isn't visible, so all the way down, as long as there's no issues. I'm going to take a peek down there and measure how much room I've got. But basically all the way down, as far down as I can go before I start having issues with it being too low. I'm going to get some steel strapping and weld them into place, tack them real quick with them on the engine. That way I know they're on the right spot, and pull them off and cut and then weld everything back up. I will probably have issues with this piece of the intake manifold right here, so I'm going to have to do some messing around with that. I might be able to kind of pull the rails forward a little bit to make them clear that, but I'll figure that out when I get there. I just don't want to modify the rails that I know work and I know fit. Also, I want to get the quick disconnects off of a Chevy minivan or a Pontiac minivan. They're plastic and they have a hard line. It's like heat shrunk to them, but if you take some heat to the plastic hard line, you can pop them off and you're just left with this disconnect with a barb fitting on it. So I'm going to get those stock rails, not cut them and flare them. I'm just going to take them and use those GM disconnects for the fuel lines, plug those in and stick my hoses on, so it'll be a much better connection and I won't have to deal with hose clamps when I want to disconnect the fuel lines. I just have those real easy fuel disconnects. You just squeeze them with your hand and pop them off, so and it'll look a little bit nicer in here as well. But yeah, the engine is almost completely done. I'm probably going to knock those couple little things out off camera and just get them done. I think the next video will be me putting the engine back in the truck, getting some stuff dialed in the engine bay. We're very close. I am super excited to hearing this thing and seeing how much more power this thing makes with this new exhaust setup, because it's got a lot more flow than it had before. I think I've already shown you guys the old manifold, but here's my air filter, which I'll be able to run now. I mean, that's what we were dealing with before. That's very, very restrictive. And on top of that, the thing was pulling in hot air from the wastegate, basically, because the turbo faced the wastegate and was sucking hot air, and so now it'll be pulling in fresh, cool air, so we can technically probably get away with running more boost. It'll make more power just because of the cooler air temperatures, and it'll be more free-flowing, and it looks a lot nicer. And my oil drain won't be hitting the lower control arms, so I can cut these springs and go all low and stuff on the truck at some point. Not right away, but I want to get the thing running and retuned before I start playing around with suspension and stuff. But I'll be able to do that now, which is awesome. I've been waiting to do that for a while. Yeah, I guess that's going to be the end of the video, guys. I'm going to end it with one last shot of the exhaust. I think this just looks really, really cool. I'm probably going to stare at it for another couple minutes before I go inside, but this just looks so clean. This is definitely the cleanest exhaust work I have ever done, and having a turbo on top of it just makes it that much better. So yeah, that's going to be the end of the video, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.